The Octonauts and the Sea of Shade. The Octonauts and the Sea of Shade. It was a quiet afternoon under the deep green sea when Captain Barnacles was riding in his log. Professor Inkling was enjoying the high tea. Dr. Shellington was polishing his clam collection. Peso Penguin was practicing the piano. Tune-Up the Vegemite was baking a cake. Quasi Kitten was chewing on some yarn. Dashy Dog was playing basketball. Tweak Bunny was... Where was Tweak? The Octonauts rushed down to the Octopod headquarters and found Tweak in a panic. Something awful has happened. I was napping under my favorite tree when the cool shade disappeared. The crew looked around, outside, inside, upside, and downside. Shadows everywhere were indeed missing. Something must be wrong in the Sea of Shade, Professor Inkling exclaimed, as he carefully selected a large book from the shelf. According to the Mysterious Places Guide, this hidden realm is ruled by a giant Shade King who governs the shadows of the world. Octonauts, you must talk to the king and discover what is causing this disturbance. But how will we find him? Quasi Kitten meowed gruffly. A very interesting question, Professor Inkling muttered. Using the cartographic bathymetry to calculate the capacific coordinates combined and the super inundated substrate should yield the location. The befuddled Octonauts stared at Professor Inkling. Follow this old map. Prepare to launch, Dashy called over the speakers. The Octonauts packed up their supplies for a long journey ahead. Tune-Up made the crew a fresh batch of kelp cakes to eat along the way. They cautiously dived down the ocean's darkest rift, waving to friendly fawns and slipping past sleeping sharks until they reached the entrance of the old fangled caves. Inside the caverns, the Octonauts were confused for days. Which side was up and which side was down? Eventually, a friendly stalactite pointed the way out. After their rocky experience, the Octonauts surfaced into a world of gray. Is this the Sea of Shade? Peso asked in dismay. The world looked very bleak, and the crew noticed shadows hiding behind plants and lurking in corners. They seemed sad and afraid. This place needs some cheering up, Barnacles declared as he pulled out his accordion and began playing a happy shanty. In the warm glow of the ship's beams, flowers blossomed and the leaves turned wonderful colors. Curious shadows slowly came out to watch. The lights and the music reminded the shades of the outside world, where there were lots of things to see and do. They happily followed the Octonauts as he traveled deeper into the sea. Finally, the Octonauts came upon a vast thicket of black, thorny branches that twined and tangled in all directions. The Shade King lives on the other side of these bramblewoods, but there's no way our ship can pass through, and the monsters up top don't look friendly, Tweak glumly concluded. Wanting to help, the shadows pulled their shady thoughts. They could merge together and form a ship to carry the Octonauts. Only shadows could pass through the shadow forest, Barnacles remarked in appreciation. The Octonauts quickly boarded, and to everyone's relief, they slipped into the thicket with ease. During the long voyage through the woods, vicious vines lashed out at the ship, and scary howls echoed all around. But inside the shadow ship, only the sounds of merry songs and laughter were heard. When the crew reached the end of the bramblewoods, they could see a sinister shade castle looming in the distance with a large palace guard waiting at the gate. The Shade King greatly disliked being disturbed by the strangers and scowled as the Octonauts were escorted into the great hall. Captain Barnacles removed his hat and gave a deep bow. Your Majesty, we miss our shadows very much. Why did they leave? The king frowned. For centuries I watched through my shadoscope as shadows were stepped on and ignored. It's not easy to follow someone around all day, but we never get any thanks. Some people are even afraid of their own shadows. Everyone would be happier if we just lived in our own worlds. That is why I called all my subjects home to the Sea of Shade. Please look again, Peso pleaded. Everyone is so sad without any shade. We've learned how important shadows are. Please let them come back, Your Highness. The Shade King grudgingly peered into a shadoscope and was surprised by what he saw. He turned back to his court, only to see glum faces looking up at him. The Shades missed their friends on the outside, too. Very well, you may all return, the king decided. If the Octonauts agree to be our shade ambassadors and help remind everyone to appreciate their shadows. Thank you, Your Majesty. Barnacles accepted their new position with pride. We'll do our best. Go, my shady subjects, the king proclaimed. Return to your friends. That night, everyone enjoyed a big party to celebrate their first ever Shadow Appreciation Day. The end. Good night.
Shoo, 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 shoo. Good night.